What if vampires were real? We know what you're probably thinking. Vampires actual are exposed, feeling good. Well, we're feeling good, so bear with us here since vampires already are real. Well, kind of out pops the vampire. Count de Villa of Cliftonvania. First off, here's the history lesson. The real-life genesis tales behind some of today's most popular ideas about vampires are frequently just as intriguing as the literature, films, and TV series that depict the iconic bloodsuckers. We all know about Bram Stoker's Dracula, Murnau's Nosferatu, and Charlaine Harris's more recent hypersexual libertine vamps, but the actual ground zero of vampire law lays with themes immeasurably more terrible than any fantasy tale: deadly illness and defective hygienic conditions. These were all big concerns for anybody living before to the emergence of modern medicine, especially for impoverished people. As a consequence, vampire tales and superstitions were established in an effort to process and cope with decreased life expectancies and sudden death. Among the diseases first associated to vampirism was porphyria, a light-sensitive ailment which gives the afflicted terrible rashes and agony when exposed to the sun. Meanwhile, tuberculosis was a highly infectious killer which often wasted away entire families, leading many villages to wonder if they'd been kissed by some kind of diseased corpse from beyond the grave. Today, modern medicine and science and causes that the stories have old are merely entertaining folk tales, but let's imagine they weren't. What would the world be like if vampires were real? Fangs out, crucifixes ready. For starters, exactly what kind of vampires are we talking about? Let's skip the Hollywood horror brands of mindless bestial bloodsuckers that seemingly exist only to feed on and frighten helpless victims. The vampires are guiding today's thought experiments are pretty human-like. They can readily communicate, and they typically make their aims and presence known to the public. For better or worse, it's a final minute alive, so why not make it a pleasurable experience? The first thing that changes, and it's a huge one, are the rules of life and death. If being undead is genuinely a thing, then what qualifies to being actually dead? If a human gets transformed, should we grieve? It's all founded in another huge issue: can humans and vampires cohabit like in the HBO series True Blood? Since blood is the vampire's vital food source, humanity's place on the food chain would be instantly threatened, so some crucial conversation would need to happen. They decide whether or not vampires can legally feed on humans or whether they should find some other blood source to satiate their intrinsic need. Otherwise, it becomes an us versus them situation, which could quite easily transform into a drawn-out bloodlust apocalypse with cross-species prejudice, fighting and slaying at every corner. But even if humans and vents have formed some kind of truce or understanding, we'd still need laws to impose rules and guidelines for undead conduct among the living. How many people don't you agree nominee in the event that vampires keep their feeding habits enough to live alongside us? Could they then campaign for wider-reaching social inclusion? Should they abide to human laws, or should humans adapt to vampire rules? And what they take offense to how they've been portrayed in the past as murdering monsters? One very crucial legal component would be vampire consent laws that likely develop a sector of human society who wouldn't mind either being totally tuned or having a vampire feed on them permanently, or on a case-by-case basis, a one-night vampire stand. If you well, can I just a peep laughs. We then need laws to protect the unwilling and the underaged against any of the undead who might seek to cross up live boundaries within our human vampire world. And what about vamps who attained as children? They might forever look childlike despite actually being 87, but are the adults regardless from the moments of human-vampire coexistence? We'd likely need laws to prevent the biting of anyone under the age of 18. In a stricter world, it had probably be illegal for vampires to even associate with children or even the general public. But could that be considered as discriminatory, and would legislation vary state to state, country to country? You got the crimson curve. On the flip side, vampire safety would also be top of the agenda. Sure, the idea of being immortal seems great on the surface, but if every vampire's healing abilities differ even slightly, we have to overhaul the entire healthcare system in order to treat vampires who have sustained severe or deadly wounds but are unable to actually die. There also be an eternal need for vampire psychologists specializing in undead mental health and emotional well-being. The police force would need to be specifically trained to and how to interact with and treat vampire victims. and/or criminals, and if there are unruly vampire types, then vampire hunter could finally be a viable jump idol for some boys and girls in blue. Then there's the question of who fills these jobs, vampires, humans, or both. Being immortal vampires could feasibly build much more impressive careers than a human could ever muster, although the whole only out at night and addicted to blood credentials could somewhat ruin or resume another major health issue in a vampire positive society would be the red stuff blood, drink and learn, specifically keeping enough on hand to feed the vampire populace so that hunting and violence against humans would be unnecessary. If vampires are at risk from the same sort of blood-borne pathogens and diseases that humans are, the huge rise in blood distribution might potentially expedite research and technologies to treat sickness. At the very least, a vampire presence would necessitate large worldwide increases in the quantity of blood banks. However, precisely how that blood is utilized for humans or vampires might become a major cause of dispute. Finally, and despite all efforts towards peaceful cohabitation, we humans would surely need a backup plan, because what if living side by side with fanged creatures of the night just doesn't work out? So we have to face the very real possibility the evolution had dealt us its reckoning via a slow invasion of vampires into our everyday lives. Our species could be quite easily quashed by a vampire kind who refuse to be contained by any laws or guidelines for their behavior, especially as the vampire to human ratio would continually increase. If vampires refuse to play ball, what could we ever really do about it, given their capacity for killing, maiming, immortality, and ruthless recruitment? They did inevitable, and overrunners have a nice day now. Yet vampires do already walk among us all the time. As we assured you at the start, vampires are real. I know we're not simply referring to infamous serial killers like Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento, who cannibalized and drank the blood of his victims. There are literally thousands of individuals throughout the United States and other nations who prefer to live a vampiric lifestyle and claim to have had an awakening which motivates them to feed. Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan, wrote in his Satanic Bible about psychic vampires, or those who feed upon the energy or life force of others for love. A sebum sought to hinder the enthusiasm or motivation of to sing Satanists. But there are people today who claim to feed upon a similar psychic energy despite there being zero inkling of scientific evidence that it works. Meantime, sanguinary or sang vampires are modern bloodsuckers who do just that, feed on real life fresh from the vein blood naturally. It's a much more complex and potentially dangerous process involving the very real threat of acquiring disease, not to mention the constant need to somehow get your hands on someone else's blood. As such, the donor-vampire connection is predicated on trust, whether between two consenting individuals or a couple in a long-term monogamous relationship. Some vampires even stated that a lengthy stretch between feedings might result in unpleasant bodily reactions like headaches and nausea. So there you have it. Certain vampires may already walk among us. They may not shapeshift, sleep in a coven, or appear like Sir Christopher Lee, but their secret of existence does present a murky mirror of humanity's darkest side. As for the all-encompassing, ultra-glamorous Edward Cullen vampire types, if they lived alongside humans, we'd have a horrific human rights problem to attempt to solve, and a never-ending demand for happy, healthy blood donors, or everyone would finish up. Hey there, great viewers of Anythink Library! If you've liked today's material and want to keep exploring the amazing world of information with us, don't forget to press the subscribe button below. And if you found this video useful or inspirational, give us a thumbs up by hitting the like button right here. Remember, your support is what keeps us continuing on this great adventure of learning and discovery. Stay interested, and stay with us at Anythink Library. Until next time.